do we choose to fail, or do we accept failure and learn from failure? Okay, so healthier habits. I'm working on healthier habits, not only because I actually want to look like a little bit more toned for the wedding, but last year I like totally crashed. I would like go and travel and then crash, and then go and travel and then crash again. And then I would travel to relax, but it was tiring to travel, and I like crashed again. And then I would burn out, and then I would power through. And it was just this like constant up and down that I said to myself, like, I'm not doing that again this year. I'm not doing that again this year. I'm really going to take the time to like spend for myself. As much as I want to travel again, I just can't. I can't do it. So I'm trying really hard not to fuck up my summer, my spring and my summer, by just like eating healthier. I've never really done the overnight oats thing.
Like soaking them? Is that?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So like, give me. I'm hearing approval from our camera team, like that the overnight oats is a good thing. So like but I also really love cheeseburgers. As I say that in a room full of vegetarians. It's like, I really love cheeseburgers. So.
I did have a really good vegan cheeseburger from Lucky Goose on Sunday.
Where's
it
that?
was really good.
Where's Lucky
It's in Nob Hill. It was a food truck, but now it's a brick and mortar.
Oh, nice.
It was
That's
really
exciting.
good.
Yeah, no, I've never heard of Lucky Goose. Well, and I love fast food. I hate to admit it. It's like my guilty pleasure, but I fucking love the Impossible Burger from Burger King. I do. I know. It sounds terrible. It's so gross. Before the last podcast, like, I even scarfed down the Whopper Jr. and I was in a really good place. So if it's a bad mood, it just needs
Those
to go.
are words that have never come out of my mouth.
No.
I ate the Whopper Jr. and I was in a really good place. However, give me like an entire pizza that I eat to myself, and that's
Gluten-free.
Like, well, obviously.
Yeah.
And then I'm like just super happy.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I'm right there with you.
So I think I know what I'm doing before the Zoom and Chill today. The Zoom and Chill is our little get together with our team to make sure that we all just kind of touch base and not always talk work when we're ever with each other, especially with team members working remotely. I might just do that for the Zoom and Chill, just go grab some shitty hot dogs. So Amy's one of our team members here at Siarza, and so one time Amy, when she was still our assistant, I was like, okay, Amy, I'll be back. I'm gonna go grab some shitty hot dogs. I've never heard her laugh so hard.
Isn't that an oxymoron?
Well, they're one and the same to me.
That's what I'm saying.
Shitty
like,
and hot dogs, hot dogs. Like, but I went to Wiener Schnitzel that day, and I was like, I just feel better because I just ate a shitty hot dog.
Interesting. So define feeling better. Like when you're like, oh, and I like felt really good after eating that. Like, what are you feeling?
So I don't think it's like, it doesn't matter what I eat. It's when I can like zone out and actually sit down and enjoy a meal, whether it be healthy, unhealthy, whether it be with friends, whatever that might be. Like enjoying a meal for me is one of those moments where it's like mindfulness. You you stop and you take a break. Like one of my best meals of all time, I went to New York with my family and my cousins. And when I say family, I say cousins because my parents would never do this. But my cousin was like, we got to go to Rockefeller Center. I was like, okay, cool. Do the touristy shit, look at Legoland or the Lego store and stuff like that. And we were hanging out. And then he's like, oh, my favorite ramen place is here. We walked in, booths.
Yeah.
One individual booth, the ramen in front of you, given to you from like a little window, and you are like forced to eat. It's like no bullshit, right? Don't, no appetizers, no fucking sake bombs or anything like that. It was just like...
It's just like a trough.
Yeah.
This is what you're here to do.
Yeah,
you're eating this bowl of ramen.
Check the marks, check the boxes, give it to the guy, and this is arigato, and you're like, okay, cool. And so I'm there, and I'm like, this is the best fucking meal I've ever had in my life. I don't have to deal with my son. I love my son, but I don't have to deal with my son and his bullshit. My cousins are like slurping away over there because there's literally like a barrier where you could that's all you can do. And I'm like... This is the best fucking meal I've ever had in my life. What are we talking about today?
Meals. I was like, let me tell you about this meal I had in Italy. No. So when you're saying you're feeling good, what I'm hearing, I mean, like everything else stops.
Yeah.
That the stuff around you maybe is anxiety inducing.
Yeah.
Stress inducing. It's not your ideal scenario.
Mm-hmm.
And then eating for you is a way to like pause all of that.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I think so. And I it gives me a moment to reset.
Yeah.
Like, and that's what meals are for. Like, okay, I know that we have the topic of failure to talk about today.
I'm about to bring that in.
Yeah. But here's an example of like something that everybody should try. If they're high stress, high strung, highly functioning, highly dysfunctional,
Whoever
you are,
functional, functioning person. Got it.
go out to a restaurant and eat by yourself.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my God, there are so many people that don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Because it's so anxiety ridden for them. Can you do that?
I do that all the time.
Yeah, so
I
do
do
I.
most things in my life alone.
But when you and I are like different but similar people, and like you work on yourself, I work on myself. And eating alone is one of those things you had to work up to in the beginning. Like, I'll never forget the first time I ate by myself. And I was super uncomfortable. I was also recently single, totally broke, but I had some money left in my bank account. My son was with his dad because my custody time wasn't my custody time. And I was like super depressed, and I was like, I'm gonna go outside of my comfort zone and eat by myself. Yes. And I prefer it. I mean, no offense to anybody else that's like the one listener that's like, well, I wanted to take Kristelle out to lunch. Like, you still can.
I'll just be wishing you weren't there the entire time.
But that's what I mean. Like, I think eating by yourself is one of the biggest like hurdles to overcome, because a lot of people are like, I have to constantly be around people. I have to do something. I have to be with somebody. I'm like, eating alone, dinner, breakfast, lunch, brunch, dinner, whatever it is.
Elevensies.
Yeah. It's a great time.
So you actually have woven in a couple different themes of failure. Yeah, that maybe you didn't even notice. So the first one, you talked about you have some health goals that you're in the mix with right now for different reasons. You have different motivations for those, and you want to do them. They're important to you. And simultaneously, food is not just an escape, though sometimes it is. It's a reset. It is this point of connection to yourself. Especially if it's just you, a booth, a window, and your trough or whatever. You know, love it. And what I'm hearing is food is significant for you. Yeah?
And culturally, it also ties me back to memories. Like, okay, random memory.
Yeah.
My mom was going through one of the most like life-threatening surgeries that she's ever had to make just to save herself a little bit longer, right? And she was in Houston, and myself, I decided to stay here instead of go to Houston. I needed to be around work. I needed to be around my kid just in case he was freaking the fuck out. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to spend time here. So I shit you not. I was in the casino on like at 11 o'clock in the morning eating chili cheese fries by myself in a corner. Yes. And I was like, and the reason why I did that is because that was my mom's like favorite meal whenever we would hang out, late night snacks at the casino. So I ate chili cheese fries because I was really worried about her. Food is like an emotional connection to people.
Yeah.
Random story.
So it's tied into culture, memories, your mental health, relationships, all of these things. And now you've set goals that take that off the table in the same way. The potential for failure in that scenario is really high.
The potential for that scenario is really high.
For failure
is really high.
Especially if there's not that mindfulness around like, wow, food is really important to me. It's a very significant part of my joy, happiness, health, and connection with self and others. And now I'm trying to trim down, get fit, this, that, and the other, which is going to ask for a different relationship with food. Maybe it's going to mean some moderation around food. Maybe it's going to mean cutting some things out. And when we go into those scenarios without the deep understanding of how significant something is that we're trying to shift, we fail. I see people set themselves up for failure all the time, completely unnecessarily, just from not taking the extra time to pause and go, what am I actually giving up here? Because am I giving up a shitty hot dog? People will go, then just give it up. Be healthier. But it's like, wait, but that shitty hot dog actually reminds me of this time I was at the beach with my grandpa. You know, all this stuff. It's like there's so much more tied to it than what's on the surface. And a lot of failure actually comes from not exploring what things mean to us and what giving them up means.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, because I think about, like, you know, you have a lot of experiences working with people with addictions, and like a food addiction is something that I'm not consciously trying to overcome, but it's something to be mindful of, because it's funny. I actually hate eating contests.
Sure.
I say that I have 4 fears in life, and I swear to God, if the team ever decides to use this as a practical joke on me, I'm gonna be pissed. I hate snakes.
Yep.
I hate sharks. I hate spiders, and I hate eating contests. I know, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because like
no, yeah,
like I was devastated.
I always think of those 4 things together, so that's.
and the reason why I say I hate eating contests is because I think of when I was a kid. Have you ever seen the movie Seven?
Yes.
The 7 Deadly Sins.
Oh gosh, yeah.
That like freaked me out as a kid. That I was like, I don't want to eat myself to death.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's funny because failure and fear go hand in hand.
Oftentimes, yeah.
Oftentimes. And so like, that's where I had that fear of like, okay, well, I don't know if I could ever get into like a food situation, but like I've had to see that whole like, oh, you have to put yourself through moderation. My mom is a perfect example. Like her diet completely had to change. If she ate certain foods, she would be in like, she would literally go to the ER because it was a pancreatic issue.
Yeah.
And just to see her go through that pain and to see her change her diet, what she didn't realize is that after those changes, she actually became a happier person. Granted, the mental challenges of like going through surgeries, you know, that's a whole different topic. But like there was a lot of joy in seeing her change her food and her food habits. And then also with myself, like I actually am not dieting. I said I'm making healthier choices. That can be as simple as like smoking one less cigarette for me, or seeing that like instead of choosing to be angry, letting it, as we had both a rough morning. It's just like making a positive choice and saying like, I tell myself every morning, what do I choose to be? Do I choose to be angry? Do I choose to let my anxiety or my stress like overcome me? Do I choose to let this asshole that said something rude to me actually like take up my time? No. And so I think it's the choice. It's the choice of not failing. It's the choice of being happy. It's the choice of what does healthy define to you. I think a lot of C-levels, like myself, don't realize. So failure, as today's topic of conversation, I think, has so many ways and forms, but it's one of those things that's like, do we choose to fail, or do we accept failure and learn from failure? I think that's something that is, I like opened a Pandora's box here in that particular topic. I'm going all over the place right now, but...
We gonna get it. We gonna catch them all.
Yeah.
Like Pokemon.
Yes.
I don't know why that happened, but it did.
Yes.
It's too late. We're gonna catch them all.
Yeah.
Yes, all the way. And I would love to hear, because I have a feeling that we differ, I'd love to hear your understanding of failure. What does that mean for you?
I think it didn't work. Like, if I look at the picture of failure, it didn't work. It sucks. Let's move on. What did we learn from it? So, here's an example. Failure to me is if we, my fiance and I, we had challenges with the home mortgage market, right? And we were trying to buy our first home. And I think the definition of failure is if there was an option that we did not overturn, a rock that we did not overturn. The failure was not the fact that we saw solution 1, 2, and 3. It's if we went to solution 1, we're like, okay, we're good. I feel like I failed. It's overexhausting every option to make sure that you get the goal. And after you've exhausted every option to get the goal, you're like, all right, that sucks, I failed. But I'm very glad that I went down that path. I didn't want to regret it. So relationships. I was very happy when I realized, when we kind of talked about this like offline, like I was very happy that one of my relationships failed. Mm-hmm. Very happy that my old employee engagement was where I used to work beforehand. I'm glad that I failed those. Mm-hmm. So to me, it's trying something, totally exhausting out the whole process. And if it doesn't work to your favor, that's a failure to me. So
if I'm hearing you right, there's a goal with a specific result. Mm-hmm. And when that doesn't come to fruition, a failure has occurred. And in that process, you've tried everything possible for the yep. set goal, for the set result.
Yeah.
And when it doesn't happen,
it's classified as a failure in my book. What's your definition of failure?
I have a hard time with this one, and if we're going to keep it concise, and I was trying to think, like, how can I like bring this down? So the short version, I'm working to let go of prescribed results. Even though I continue to learn about myself and the world, and I'm, getting older and growing up and all the things that come with being a human, I still have a really limited perspective that comes down through all the filters of all the things that exist in my life, right, and being me. And even as I expand, my perspective's still really small. And when I am so dedicated to it, like it has to look like this, that's when I start having stress. That's when I start to suffer. That's when I have a lot of shame and things going on inside of myself, when oftentimes my little result that I was working so hard for was not even the coolest option that was available. And when I can let go of the result, let go of the goal mindset, and just stay focused on my efforts right now and what feels right for me right now, I release that limited perspective to the entirety of the universe for results that I never would have been able to imagine myself. So now that I've been trying more and more to operate in that and to not be result oriented and to just be present and effort oriented, it's really hard to fail.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And I think that's a good perspective, because if you think about it, like you've heard that phrase, it's not about the goal, it's about the journey that's there. It sounds like to me you're enjoying the car ride, not necessarily getting to the destination.
Here's what I've learned, actually. Just in the last year, I really recognize, we do hear that, like, it's not the destination, it's the journey, right? What I've realized, there is no destination. There's no end place.
I think this is where we really differ. I was like, okay.
Then let me ask you this. What is an example of something that you were there and you were like, boom, completely concluded, I'm entirely done, I have nothing left to learn, nowhere else to go, no additional things to do for myself. I am complete. This is concluded.
The Domestic Violence Resource Center.
Okay.
That's a heavy topic. Not because of so if you've never heard of the Domestic Violence Resource Center, it's an organization in New Mexico that focuses on helping individuals that struggle with domestic violence and how to break that cycle. I loved the nonprofit. I served on the board for over 6 to 7 years, planned almost every damn event that they had, and then handed off the nonprofit. And at the end, it got really tumultuous with the leadership that I chose to be there. And I learned my lesson. I'd say the individual that I chose and advocated for to be a president, even though it was incredibly challenging, I remember the feeling of my last board meeting, and I sat there and I was like, it's over. Mm. It was so great to feel it's over. Mm-hmm. Now, they came back and was like, hey, Kristelle, can you help us with this, and this? I was like, sure. But I also remember that feeling of I'm done. Mm-hmm. And it's great. Granted, it wasn't perfect, but it actually took me 2 years later to realize I did some really great work, even with the failures that I had as president of the board. So I think that was like my moment of like, this is great. I don't have to deal with this shit anymore. Like, nonprofits are messy.
They're very messy. Now, did you learn from that experience? Mm-hmm. Did you take something with you from it? Maybe many things?
Many things.
Did your impact that you had there changed things there also? Some things shifted just because of your work that you did there, your influence there.
Yeah, I would say so, yeah.
And you're talking about it right now because it was impactful for you. And you brought it with you.
Mm-hmm. And there were some failures too, where I look at certain situations where I said, did I turn every stone over? And I did. And I made some wrong, and that's another thing too. Like, I made some wrong decisions as president. Unpopular opinions, as they say.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, the organization is a much better place than where it was when I left it. And somebody had to go through and make those shitty decisions.
So I would argue, because of all of the things that you've just confirmed, it's still in your journey. It's still in motion. Everything you set in motion there is happening and still improving. The changes that happened within you as a result of your time and effort there are still happening. You'll never be you who you were before being there. That organization will never be what it was before you were there. And therefore, it was not a destination. It was a part of your journey that you've moved on from, but you've brought everything with you from it, and you've left plenty of you there as well. There is no destination.
It's funny because I disagree. I said my goal was to make the organization a better organization than when I first got in. And it is 10 times better of an organization than where it was. And I know we're crossing the same paths here, right, in terms of the conversation. But I mean, like, I remember, why did I stay a board member? You know, there was one of our first executive directors passed away. There was 2 other executive directors until this final executive director was here. And it was just one of those, like, eye-opening conversations. I was like, I'm here because I want to change the organization. And I did when I left. I left because I knew that the organization had evolved. But I don't think it was the journey. It was not just the journey that got me there. I accomplished my mission. Does that make sense?
Yes. And now you bring it with you, and they bring you with them.
Yeah.
And therefore, it was not an end point. It was a continuation of the entirety of your journey. I think this is also where you and I differ, where all my stuff comes back to going within. Like, I'm the one thing that's constant in my life for this whole lifetime. I come with me everywhere. My experience of, like, whatever is part of me is now part of things going forward. And I don't see things the same way with, like, here's this outside goal, the end. It always is coming back to, okay, now how is that a stronger foundation for who I am becoming? How has that contributed to me being more of who I'm here to be, who I want to be? How am I now showing up as a cooler, kinder version of myself in the world as a result of that, right? So even if a thing, an outward thing, fails miserably, of which I have many of them, it's not a personal failure so long as I am learning, growing, and deepening as a result of it.
What moment in your life professionally did you have a part where you said, I think I failed. I know I failed. And how much of a physical or mental impact did that have on you?
I was reminded, I went back and listened to a talk I gave in 2021 called The Generosity of Failing Publicly. And it was right after I closed my business, which was a failure. I failed at running that business. I ran the business into the ground. You know what I'm saying? And I had this realization where all of a sudden it, like, I just hit a wall. I, like, paused down. It was like, stop with the stories. I'm a spin doctor. I make anything sound good. Any, like, terrible situation, I'm like, and here's why it's an opportunity. And, like, and here's why it's great. Great quality, annoying quality also. But I had been doing that so long in this business that I had spent years working to build. And I had to face the facts. It had been self-sustaining at one point. It had provided an income at one point. That wasn't true anymore. I was paying to run my business. I was paying to have this job. And there were so many things that had fallen through the cracks, and it just wasn't running itself as a business and providing for me financially. And I had to wake up to the fact that I had failed at running that business.
Did you feel like you overturned every stone to make sure it didn't fail?
Yes. I had gone through a lot of renditions of it. I had done coaching programs, mentors, brought in consultants. I had done a ton of different attempts myself at tuning it differently to try to find the formula that worked. But the truth was, I wasn't in a place where I was ready to run a business, where I was stable enough as a person to handle all of the things, that go into running a business. It's life consuming. Being an entrepreneur, it means all of you. Running a business and having others rely on you. There's so much pressure. There's so many pieces moving all of the time. I wasn't personally in a place where I could do it. So every attempt I made, I was still the problem. And that was the realization I had, that the work I was doing was great. All of it was sound except me. Mm-hmm. And I had to realize that. And I had a legit breakdown. It was like I had been living in one perspective of reality, mm-hmm. and I'd been telling people like this, that, and the other and believing it. And then I'm like, those things aren't inaccurate. Those are true, but they're also not true. They're not fully true. That it hit really hard. Mm-hmm. I was like not functional. Like physically, my entire body shut down. I was mentally exhausted. This was the only time in my life where I went to the people in my life and I said, I have nothing to give you. I cannot contribute to this relationship in any way right now.
Yeah.
I'm so exhausted. I'm so drained. I have nothing. I am empty. And I still need you to show up for me. I need you to give to me and to help me. It will not be coming back your way right now.
If I was in that exact same position, I would have done the same.
It was really hard for me. I've gotten a lot better at asking for help, and now I have no problem, receiving help and all of that.
Sure. And how long was your business in? You told me, and I totally forgot.
Legitimately. Well, I didn't intend to do it as a business in the beginning.
What are you doing? Like a mafia shit?
No,
What's going on over here? Legitimately?
No point in my life was like, I'm going to work with people with sex addiction and help them gain freedom from addiction and all that stuff. No, I had not thought that.
Yeah.
But people kept coming to me for help. I see what you're doing out there in the world, this, that, and the other. Can you help me do the same thing? I see your life is getting better. I see you're recovering.
And then you're talking about the video production part?
Yeah. Well, I started public speaking on my story and things in 2015.
Sure. Yeah.
And so I was getting exposure. I'd been on podcasts. I'd been on TV. I've been in documentary film. It was cool. And so I kept saying, no, I'm nobody to be helping anybody. No. And finally it was like, yeah, there's nobody else, Jace. It's such a niche area. It's like, there are not a lot of people doing this. So finally I was like, okay, maybe I can see what I can do, to help other people. So I didn't intend to go it as a business. But then when more people kept coming and they were asking for it and there was a need for it and stuff. So it's like, okay, this is clearly part of why I'm here. Like, let's do it. Let's go. Let's learn how to do this stuff. Let's go into some programs, this, that, and the other. And so legitimately, I say 2017 or 18 is when I formed my LLC. Let's make this a business. So I had been doing it before that. It hits my ego so hard. That tearing down and my body and it was my ego that had died. A piece of my ego had died to admit I failed. I do not have the personal stability, strength, and skill set to run a business. There are all these things that I started recognizing. I did not do these well. And though I'm an amazing person full of potential, I was not in a place to realize that potential and actually bring it into the world.
Yeah.
That was a really hard time for me.
Most importantly, thank you for sharing that story. And secondly, the story of that, I think, because we always ask ourselves, when we get listener number 2 or listener number 3 on the podcast, because we have moms, is there's going to be a C-level executive that's going to be out there, or an executive director, or a VP, a president, who's going to listen to this. And I'm sure they're going to feel that sense of failure or that looming sense of failure. And so one of the things we always talk about, which, we were talking about last night, is whenever people share a story, they either get super critical because they're like, well, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? Why are you oversharing this? What? They become number one critic, right? That's what you're trying to avoid. And then in number 2, one of the other things I think is really fascinating is the fact that when you shared that story, I very much started to see well, I know that feeling very well. What did I start to do? So in the brinks of failure that I've been at, I've started to turn those stones, right? And what you did is not a failure to me because your experience makes you an even better team member because you know what it's like to be me when I don't have that around a lot, right? Moving forward, or like thinking about, okay, so when you're like, okay, so whenever I remember they're like timestamps to the agency. There's one point where I've actually had to tell the team, I don't have enough to make payroll.
Ooh.
And they walked out crying.
Yeah.
They got paid.
Of course.
But of course that lack of stability made them nervous. Okay. And then 3 years later, I remember this feeling of talking to the former owner but founder of both Cake Fetish and Rebel Donuts. Highly love her, recommend her. She actually helps small businesses now, which is a beautiful thing. And she was the one that was like, Kristelle, I had pregnancy struggles. And there was no option for me except for getting pregnant. That was the mindset that I took. As intense as that was, she has twins now. Right? And then, so I remember that pinnacle conversation. And even Spencer, my fiance, and I, we even talked about it. Like, is it time to sell? Is it time to leave? This burden is really difficult on you, etc. And I'm like, I don't know yet. I'm not ready to throw in the towel. Something tells me that it's not time yet. And so that was like timestamp number 2. And then timestamp number 3 was the pandemic. This time, now, weirdly enough, 3 years ago, the world closed. It's the 21st, right? So 6 or 7 days later, I was like, we had a great run, Siarza. Like, in my head, I'm like, we had a phenomenal run.
Yeah.
And I said, our organization won't be able, I said it all along. I said, with the way that we were operating, there was no way we were going to survive a crisis like this. A recession, a pandemic. I had tried to save our cash as much as possible, but I was like, we're never going to survive. I literally thought that it was a predetermined or a self-fulfilling prophecy. I was like, in my head, I'm like, we're going to fail. And, you know, it sucks because we're going to be, it wasn't us that went down. It was another agency that went down here in town. And every one of those different timestamps, oh, obviously we're still here after that third timestamp.
Hooray!
But like, I think about those 3 particular moments and I say to myself, I'm like, what did I do to make sure, what stone did I overturn to make sure that that wasn't going to be a problem? And I'll never forget the people. People really can help with realizing failure or not failure. And you're going back to so another thing too, you're talking about your story, like, I understand that feeling. You have to be in the right mindset to not fail. Or you have to be in the right mindset to run a business. Besides the failure part. So the running the business part, I remember specifically, I loved dating when I was dating. And I giggle because it's like, I'm getting married now and I'm like, those days are long gone. Yeah, just enjoy it.
You still have to have date nights and you do date your husband.
I very much will be dating my husband while we're married. There's no doubt about that. And we were having this conversation. That's always like, oh, the butterflies came back.
Oh, yay. You're kind of blushing just a little bit.
I'm blushing because he's a cat-loving metal head that loves golf and really loves cat videos. Like, he fucking loves cat videos. Anyways, so I'm giggling.
Check. Yep, love it.
It's just so funny. But no, so I remember when I first met him, and it was like we were eating like breakfast, and I said, I need to let you know. I swear to God, I gave him this condition. I said, I need to let you know, it is not easy dating an entrepreneur. That was like number 1, the red flag that I told him.
Being an entrepreneur
is
absolutely a red flag.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And I said, because I'm like, we fail, we suck, we get mad, we're temperamental, we're psychopaths.
The business was going to come before you a lot of the time. It's just going to have to.
And I swear to God, and I literally told him, I was like, this is who I am, and it's going to be really difficult to date a business owner.
Yeah.
And then 7 to 8 years later, here we are. He hasn't ran away. But I told him, I said, if you're not going to be supportive, I won't be successful.
100%.
I didn't say that to him, but I knew in my mind, I didn't want to have to choose between my company in him.
Yeah.
But I knew if I didn't have him, I wouldn't have a successful company. So it was just one of those stories of like, I know that we talk about stories of success, but like I didn't want to fail. Mm. So I wanted to make sure I had a partner that was supportive, because I didn't have a partner that was supportive once.
Yeah.
And my God, he was an asshole. And it sucked because he was just like, well, I shit you not. Oh, you're going to love this one. You're going to love this one.
Are you about to tell me he did not like cat videos?
He did not like cat videos.
Ooh, girl.
He told me once, he's like, women can't have careers and a family at the same time. Oh. Is your inner blood boiling right now?
No, actually it's not.
Mine was. Well, it still does.
Yeah, I like, one, that's stupid because they're doing it literally all the time. And even back in hunter-gatherer days, the women collected 80% of the meal. We've been having careers and running families since the beginning of time. So one, I'm just like, oh, that's cute ignorance. Like, what a tough life you're going to have. So I'm just like, that's a bummer. Yeah. And then the other part is, actually, it is, as you know, incredibly difficult to do both well, to be fully present for both.
It's hard.
To never miss anything in one or the other. Choices will have to be made. Priorities are going to have to shift and all of that. So can anyone, not just moms, where you at, dads, be stepping up in your parenting, anyone, it is incredibly difficult to have two things that consume so much of your time and energy.
Sure.
So I'm like, there's some truth to that, but his mentality, I'm like, oh, that's a bummer for you to be in the world that way.
And that's why he's an ex. So,
yes.
Yeah. And
it's a win. Not a failure.
And that relationship was a massive failure. But I'm glad that relationship was a massive failure, because that's what led to Siarza being born. So that's good.
I like what we're touching on here, which I think is the most important part of failure, that it's fine.
It's fine.
It's part of it.
You're going to live.
Well, not only are you going to live, it's literally part of success. We put all this pressure to not fail, but if we don't fail, we will never succeed. They don't exist without one another. And we have all this, like, we have to succeed. A lot of priority there. Yeah. And you've got to do anything it takes, right? We'll hear that, right? You got to do anything it takes to succeed. Turn over any stone. Well, guess what? Failing is part of that. It is part of the anything it takes. And when we're not failing, we're not trying new things. We are not pushing ourselves. We're not going past our comfort zones. We are not stretching into new territory. People who never fail have no business in my life. Those people, I'm like, you're living small. You have decided you've got it all figured out, and you're only going to live in your little compartment because that's where you feel like you've done something and you're successful. That is very worrisome to me. And this mentality we have that, like, oh, I failed and I can't tell anybody about it, or I have to lie about it for years, or I have to put all this money on my credit card, this was me back in the day, so that nobody will notice that I'm a failure, is ridiculous. I vote we start celebrating failure as the awesome, courageous act that it is.
Yeah.
In addition to that, sometimes something failing is the best possible thing. And you noted that, right? Like, that relationship was a failure. If we're counting relationships, like the goal of relationships is to be together forever, most relationships are failures. Every relationship I've been in has failed. And that's fantastic, because do I want to be with anyone in my life that I've dated? Sorry, gentlemen, I do not. Love you all, but no. Those all failed, and I'm glad for it. Other jobs you'd mentioned failed. Now you're on your own business. You do it well. You support other people. You help people move into their dreams. Amazing. Failing is fine, and sometimes it's what needs to happen. Another area we differ, where you're like, I'm going to turn over every stone. I'm going to do anything I possibly can to make sure it succeeds. I used to be that way as well. I would take myself to, like, the physical limits as well. I was so unhealthy, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically, grammatically, whatever we want to say. Never grammatically, fear not. But then I read a book. I wish I could remember the name of it, but it was about quitting, and that it's okay to quit. That sometimes quitting quickly is the best way to succeed.
Oh, yeah.
So we have this notion of, like, you have to do absolutely everything in order to succeed. No, sometimes just calling it, like I did with my business, the truth was that had failed, and it was done. And being able to just go, you know what? It's appropriate to throw in the towel. more importantly is something you said, where you checked in with yourself, where you had milestones of like, is this it? We had a good run. No, something tells me there's more here. Mm-hmm. Something tells me I'm not done. And even if on paper, facts and figures showed this isn't going great or whatever, you listened to yourself. You checked in with yourself and you thought, you know what, even though I don't have the outward evidence that this is true, I believe it and I'm going to keep going. That's the most important piece.
I think one of the things that we, looking back on those moments in particular, I think that, you even said something too. You said it was such a bruise on my ego, or it crushed my ego. I learned a long time ago that a family member of mine, when I was struggling with relationships and really finding the one, I said, how did you know she was my mentor. You'll hear me reference her a lot, but Auntie Deli said once, I asked her, I said, how did you know that your husband was the one? Because to me, she found a successful relationship, and in that successful relationship, I just, what was the secret sauce? And she's like, I didn't have to babysit his ego.
Yes, find me that man.
Yeah, and I think what's really cool, and then when I met Spencer, I was like, I knew he was the one. When I met certain team members here, I knew they were the ones for this team, including you, including Justin behind the camera and the mic. Like, I don't like to surround myself around people with egos, because crushing an ego, to me, is one of the most defeating things. And that's why I try to operate without having an ego, because it's painful. It's painful to crush your ego or to see it like squander and fail. Like it's painful. Mm-hmm. But if you have little or none of it, again, difference between confidence and ego, right? But if you are able to take yourself aside and say, why are you here? If it's for other people and yourself, I don't think you'll have a problem failing and being okay to fail if the ego is small enough or managed enough to begin with. It crushed so many people that in my past, in terms of like really defeating their ego, because I'm sorry, you're not God's gift to women. Or I'm sorry, your business is not the best shit since sliced bread. It's not. People that operate with that type of leadership, and when they fail, like that's why it's 10 times harder for them to fail, And so that's where I'm coming from when it comes to what failure looks like. It's like there's got to be a sense of humility. There's got to be a sense of relentlessness. There's got to be a sense of understanding, self check-ins, right? Mm-hmm. Balance. And if the imbalance is so bad, like maybe it is time to go throw in the towel, right?
Yeah.
So
and a sense of adventure.
In a sense of adventure.
Setting out to do anything, whether that's professionally running a business or an eating contest, not for you, not for you. Yeah. Other people, they might want to do. That sense of adventure of like, I have no idea what's going to happen. I think I know where I'm going, and I have a loose idea of how I'm going to get there, and then I have no idea, which is really the truth of it, right? We like to like, and then this will happen, and then I'm going to do this. And we talked in the last episode of like, success comes in these steps, and this is how it's supposed to go. And then it doesn't. Steps. Yeah. And so it's like that sense of adventure of just like, I have this idea, and I'm just gonna go out there in the world and see what we do with it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And bring the ego along. Like we'll have a whole other discussion on this.
Yep.
On the purpose of the ego. It has a purpose. We're not meant to kill it or move it away, but put it in its rightful role. Like manage it, like you said. Mm-hmm. And when we're so focused on that, which is very self-focused, that ego, like all in the world of me, everything hurts. Everything hurts. It's so exhausting. I did that my first whole part of my life is like just trying to uphold this image, right? And so failing meant not like, I failed at this thing. Like I failed at running a business. Yep, fact. Mm-hmm. Very different than I am a failure.
Oh, very different.
Right? And like when it's an ego, that's what it is. I did this action and therefore it's who I am.
Yep.
And what you're talking about with those things that you're sharing about and like the balance and the relationships, you didn't mention that, but the people being so important. When we have our self knowledge on who and what we really are, then fail all the time.
Yeah.
You're doing whatever you want. It doesn't matter because it doesn't actually impact your worth and your right to be here and exist as the person you are.
So if you were to walk away with one thing for somebody to learn from today's episode, what would that be?
Could I do two things?
Yeah.
Okay. Don't be afraid to fail. It means you're trying something new. You're being brave. You're being courageous. You have that sense of adventure. And sometimes things fail, and that's okay. So not to be afraid to fail. And then what you said, I think you touched on the most important thing for me in this, my biggest takeaway, is the self-check-in. And self-trust, which is what I heard you having, where other people maybe even said, I don't think you're going to make it through this pandemic, or, hey, you're not able to pay your employees. You have failed at running this business, or maybe you need to rethink this. And you went, there's another stone I haven't unturned yet. You know what? I feel like it's not time to close it out. And you listen to that, and then here we are, and nowhere near closing. You're kicking ass in the world and in this
because
building.
Of people like you.
Well, it's always a team effort, but you listened to yourself against all odds and against the sound advice of others. You trusted yourself.
Yep.
That to me is my takeaway.
Well, I appreciate the time to talk about failure. What are we talking about in the next podcast?
Well,
episode.
We did success.
We
did failure. Now we're gonna do stories. Let's shoot the shit.
Oh my God. Thanks for everybody for listening. And don't forget to follow us on your favorite social channels. And most importantly on Spotify, and listen to our next episode. Thanks everybody.